about to get all up in your biz. You in?
Yeah, I'm in.
So, Stephen, I see you on Instagram and you have got the real Pan and the fake Pan, but I don't see Stephen anywhere. So, where has Pan come from?
Well, Pan was just kind of like even before I was doing art was a nickname I picked up. Probably the start of college, just because I really liked that film Hook with Robin Williams, and like you're that age where I almost like I think one day I just changed my name on Facebook or something, and then made everyone call me Pan, and then since then
It's just
everyone
like,
knows me as Pan. Like
yeah, yeah.
like my fiance calls me Pan. Like she's shocked my name is Stephen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Really? So, okay. I want before we begin, I just want to read something on your page, and we can get the fake Pan. Okay, so this is a pinned post, and it goes like this. When I was a kid, I used to have to do a lot of stuff I didn't want to do. And I don't mean the usual, like cleaning my room or doing my homework, although I was supposed to do those things too. The stuff I had to do was weirder, like having to say the same prayer over and over again before I could sleep, or running up the stairs to save my family's lives. I didn't understand what made me feel like I needed to do stuff to solve my anxious thoughts, but eventually I gave it a name. I called it the puzzle. The puzzle followed me as I got older, influencing almost every aspect of my life, from school friendships to the way I viewed my own reflection. Nearly 10 years after the puzzle first showed up, I was diagnosed with OCD, a long wait, but an all too common one. So, Stephen, OCD, like, for someone that knows the acronym obsessive compulsive disorder, what actually is it? And how did it show up in your life from like, when was the first time?
Well, I think like as far back as I can remember, I had OCD tendencies. Um, like when I was really young, as I mentioned in my book, I kind of had obsessive thoughts, or I had intrusive thoughts, which I would then treat by doing like a series of prayers, especially if it was like moral thoughts. Because people with OCD, one of the main kind of things they do is they kind of perceive thoughts as being like real threats, or that like by having a bad thought, you are a bad person. Like intrusive thoughts are extremely common, but for people with OCD, they view them in a different way, which makes it harder to get rid of them, and which actually gives them their power in a lot of the ways. It's kind of that classic idea. If you like, there's the psychology thing of if you try to not think about like a white polar bear, that's the first thing you think about. So when people with OCD get these intrusive thoughts, they try like they fight against them because they see them as a threat, which ironically gives them more power. And then through compulsions or rituals, they kind of try to neutralize the thoughts, and this can come in a huge different many ways, like which kind of makes it so is why it's so hard to diagnose, or why people who have it don't know why they have it, or don't know that it is OCD, because of the whole different like there's like I'm sure there are people who have a compulsion or a ritual that's specific just to them. So trying to figure out what it is can be so complicated because you can't Google your compulsion and get an answer. Where it just comes down to like the process of intrusive thought and then doing a compulsion to kind of gain some relief. But the problem is it actually gives the thought more power, and then the relief fades and it becomes stronger. So yeah, I had a lot of different symptoms growing up, and it took me a long time to figure out that this could be actually. I thought it was just the way my brain worked again. I thought it was the puzzle, just something, just kind of like a weird personality quirk I had. But as I got older, it kind of became more debilitating, and I began to do more research, and eventually I stumbled onto OCD, and that kind of where I began my journey, kind of exploring it more and figuring out what was going on.
And did you notice this like as a young kid in school? Like what age did you start thinking, what were the little things that maybe you had to do?
Well, like as well as the compulsions, I had a lot of like obsessional anxiety. From a really young age, I become obsessed with my health and about like different diseases and stuff. I remember having worries about having a heart attack when I was 12, like, and you're
Okay.
constantly, and then like, so that the intrusive thought for me then was my heart's going to stop and I'm going to die. So then my compulsion will be to take my pulse and like listen to, and then I'd be walking around checking my pulse all the time to kind of like ease that thought, and then it would eventually become a compulsion, things like that.
So they can change as,
Oh
with
yeah,
different things.
yeah, and they tend to kind of um, attach themselves to things that you like the most or like enjoy the most, which is kind of the more kind of insidious part about it, is like the things you enjoy, the compulsions will normally attach themselves to.
So when you had this like health kind of anxiety,
Yeah.
or like, I don't want to say the incorrect words, but obsessive compulsive disorder around your health, like, do you feel like there was something maybe in your childhood that triggered that? Like, was there something that you can pinpoint, like maybe health in the family or your own health, you got sick or something that all of a sudden, or
No, no, because it wouldn't just be my health. Like I'd eventually, like, I go through periods of not worrying about my health, but then my brain would then attach themselves to something else, whether it be like something from the past I'd ruminate about, or like something going on in the future. There'd always be something, so I wasn't specific to health. Say, if I like, there wasn't like in a case of someone becoming ill and like it really impacting me. It was just my brain picking things to make me anxious about, I think.
and do you still have, say, like health anxiety, like around your health and your fitness and different things like that, or does it just change from time to time?
I had my health anxiety hasn't been really that profound in the last few years, but I still have compulsions that I struggle with around bedtime and stuff, which um, I've got, like, now again that I kind of understand it, I'm better equipped to kind of like deal with it. So like like OCD, you can't cure it. Like, it's a long term thing, but it can be treated, and for a lot of people, given the right treatment, whether it be talk therapy or a combination of that and medication, it can be completely like dormant.
And so when you say about like your night rituals, right? Like, say, like you were saying the prayers,
Yeah.
are like, we're in Ireland, this is typically Catholic. Are these like Catholic prayers, or just prayers that you just kind of make up in your head? Because like, what happens if you don't is it something in your head that says, if I don't say these prayers, something will happen?
It
Is
would.
that what happens?
Well, it was for me. I had a subtype, or I have a subtype of OCD called just right OCD. So a lot of the time, just right OCD, a lot of the time the obsessive thought is missing, where I would have more of like a physical anxiety. Um, like if I back then, like, and this also kind of shows if OCD can wear a mask. It started off me praying to get rid of this anxiety, and when I was young enough, I thought it was kind of like it was a moral panic, and then by praying I was fixing it. But like, I lost my faith very young, and then eventually I was just praying to get rid of the anxiety without any sort of like, it was not based in a belief in God or in sinning or anything. It was just an activity that I felt cured my anxiety. And then as I got older, that changed then into, I didn't pray anymore. I brushed my teeth to do the same kind of, I was doing the same activity again to kind of give relief to the anxiety. It's almost like, I think about it now, it's like almost like a smoker will smoke a cigarette, they'll get the relief, and then the cravings will come back on. He smokes a cigarette, and I would go to bed, have these like really strong feelings of anxiety, and I'd have to do something to treat them. And so it started off praying, then brushing my teeth, and then came into counting, and all these different things you do to kind of manage it. But again, all they really do in the long term is make them more powerful and more difficult to break.
And how, like, was it, like, how did you tell your parents about this, or did they recognize it themselves? Were they like, did they say, like, Stephen, what's going on? Are you going through, or were you like, there's something going on here, I need help? Or how did it materialize?
No, not really, because people with OCD are very good at keeping secrets or like hiding their compulsions. It's a pretty major component of it, which is why it's such a lonely disorder, especially for young people, because if you don't understand it, again, like, there was stages where I thought I was crazy, and you don't want to share it, because especially people you can have intrusive thoughts that are quite disturbing, and the last thing you want to do is go to a parent and say, I'm having these thoughts, whether it be of violence, or there can be sexual orientation thoughts or things like that. So it can be really kind of isolating. And compulsions don't have to be physical acts. You can have mental compulsions that other people can't see. So it can be really easy. Well, not really easy, but people with OCD go lengths to try hide it from people. So no one really, like, people knew I was always anxious, but like the extent to what I would have to do to treat my anxiety, I was very good at hiding from people, and I hid it purposefully because I didn't want people to think I was crazy or that this
Because
was the way I was.
yeah, and if you think about it, if you've got intrusive thoughts that relate to like violence, or there's some sexual nature to them, or
Yeah.
whatever it is, like you are going to question, like, am I normal? Like,
Mm.
is this normal? And I don't want to tell people because there might be an element of like shame around
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
So that's the challenge.
Yeah, people with OCD, again, they see their thoughts as a real threat. So they think when they have like a violent thought that like they might actually act it out. Um, so then their fight or flight makes them resist the thought as much as possible, which then makes the thought again stronger. Um, and there's people who have puro, which is just only obsessive thoughts, like, so they don't even have compulsions. They just have these constant intrusive thoughts. Yeah, so that is a major component of it and kind of fuels it.
So at what point did you say, okay, I need to get because you talk about in that little, your cartoon drawing that you got diagnosed, so you got
Yeah,
officially diagnosed with it. Was that like a long road to get a diagnosis? Did you make the decision that you were going to go out
it
and get
was.
it, or?
Yeah, it was a very long road, and it came about during one of my health panics. I would spend a lot of time on Google reading about illnesses and diseases. I would spend my entire day, sometimes like 6 hours at a time, researching like survival statistics, age statistics for how likely I was to get thing. And then one day I kind of was just like, this is getting so out of hand. So instead of Googling like symptoms of lung cancer, I Googled why am I obsessed with lung cancer, and I kind of stumbled onto OCD. And my first thought when I saw it was, oh, people with OCD love to keep things clean and organized. Like, I'm not like that at all. But the more research I did, I realized that was a completely wrong perception of it. And that again is one of the things I try to aim with my book to do, is kind of dismiss this kind of like idea that OCD is a personality quirk, or that people with OCD enjoy doing their compulsions or rituals, where people with OCD don't enjoy that at all. They're doing it to kind of treat these really intense feelings of anxiety. I think if I had known that it wasn't that, I would have got treatment a lot earlier. Again, I say in my book that the majority of people endure symptoms of OCD for 11 years before seeking treatment. And that, again, I think a huge part of that is the way that people don't really understand the true way that it manifests. Where with my book, again, aimed at younger people, I'm hoping that maybe a young kid will pick it up and realize, oh, what's going on with me? This is what it is, and be able to then kind of seek out help and begin their journey to getting better a lot sooner than I did, and that most people have to go through.
And when you realized that you had OCD, when you stumbled across it, right? Did you go to a GP, or did you what did you, or did you have you just self-diagnosed and said, okay, now I need to learn to deal with this myself, or?
So I self-diagnosed on the internet, obviously, and then I went to my GP and I was like, listen, this is what I have. Like, this
Yeah.
explains a lot. I think my GP is brilliant, but I think he kind of put down a lot of my stuff down to just normal anxiety. I probably didn't share with them a lot of the kind of the extents that some of my behaviors were getting to, and he referred me then to a psychiatrist. I over the years I've done CBT therapy, um, and but I think, like, even beyond therapy, one of the most helpful things I did was to learn about it and educate myself on it,
Yeah.
because once you kind of understand the way it works, it's much easier to rationalize it in your head and be like, okay, I have this feeling, this is what I'm going to do, but if I do it, I'm going to give it power. So you kind of like, and that's kind of that's the foundation to the treatment for OCD, exposure, exposure and ERP, exposure response prevention. So once you kind of learn that, it's much easier to kind of, well, it's not easy, but it's, you kind of are, the path is laid out of how you can kind of like combat it. So I was then referred. I did therapy and I educated myself and kind of was able to look at it and like act more in opposition to it rather than just accepting that that was the way it was going to be.
Yeah, and how did it impact like your friendships in school and dating? Like even
Yeah.
dating. I know you're congrats, you're getting married this year, but how did it impact that?
Yeah, well, it definitely helped. Like looking back, like only after I kind of figured out what was going on, I look back and it definitely like held me back. I would never go on like lads' holidays, because I knew I'd have to stay with someone and it would just make it really difficult to do my compulsions and rituals. Um, Even sleeping over at people's houses, like I resisted, or like I would, and then I would try like, "Oh, this is ridiculous. I have to go and see the world or do something, like get out of my box," and then I would just panic. And like for example was I was supposed to go to Canada with one of my best friends for J1, and I just paid my visa and everything, and I just got too much, and I was like, I can't go. So I missed a lot of opportunities to kind of do things that I look back now and I you're only young once. I had been able to. I kind of wish I did. So it definitely held me back and prevented me from doing a lot. Where again, if I had figured it out earlier what it was and got it treated, I probably would have had a better quality of life. Well, I definitely would have had a better quality of life, but I would have also got to experience more of life. Which now, luckily, I'm still young. I can do that now that I've on a better road.
Yeah, and I think sometimes like look where the path has brought you. You know,
Mm.
you're like this is going on to now your cartoons, and you've got your book, and you're going to inspire other people and be able to share kind of your story,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is like inspirational
Yeah,
in
thank you.
itself, you know. So tell me about the fake pan. You've got over 300,000 followers on Instagram, and the cartoon drawing. Like, where did that all start, and how did it start, and how did you get such a huge
Yeah.
following?
Yeah, so as you said earlier, I have the real pan, the fake pan Instagram, and the first one I had was the real pan, and I used that. I worked as a portrait painter for 5 or 6 years, just after college, and that was my main income and my job. But it quickly became a very kind of monotonous thing for me. Like people would reject me, and I'd paint a rugby player, or at the time Conor McGregor was really big. So people would be like, "Send me a photo, go, will you paint this?"
Yeah.
And I would use like a projector and like graphing and stuff, so it became really kind of like fill in the lines. And then just before lockdown, I've always had an interest in like comics, and I've always been a big reader, and I started drawing kind of more comics and stuff like that. So, um, not wanting to kind of fill up my business, my painting business with cartoons that had no really connection, I set up the fake pan as a side Instagram, being like, I'll just do random stuff here. Um, and then that quickly took over and became the main account. But the way that happened was the beginning of lockdown, and then George Floyd was killed.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, I had been doing these comic diaries of lockdown, kind of trying to hone my craft and learn how the best way to do comics and like find my voice. And I found it really helpful. And then when George Floyd died, everyone they posted the black panel in kind of solidarity, and I thought that was a really powerful thing to do. But I was at home, and I was like, there must be something more proactive I can do, because I'll be the first to admit that I was like ignorant to the realities that were going on. So I was like, I'm going to use this new format to educate myself. So I did some research. I found Eric Gardner's story, and I illustrated it for myself. I hadn't posted anything like that on social media, and I didn't plan to either, but I shared it with my friends in my WhatsApp group, and they were like, this is great. Like, they didn't know about him. They're like, I know about this now. It kind of like it does a good job of hopefully showing these people as people, as opposed to just hashtags or names, by illustrating them going about their daily lives and it being disrupted by these injustices. So they kind of pushed me to, they're like, share it, I think people can benefit from this. And it very quickly got a reaction. And again, it was lockdown, so no one was doing anything. I had all this free time, so I dedicated myself for I dedicate myself to that solely as being my main project, researching and learning these names for the guts of a year. And it was a combination of self-education and people or family members or people killed by police reaching out to me and asking me, could you use your platform to tell my loved one's story, which I always was the most fulfilling use of it, because I felt like I was being actively useful or helpful. And again, like, unfortunately these things are continuing to happen, so when they do, I try to be part of the kind of mechanism of awareness where it can happen. If I read a headline, and I'll straight away begin making something and share the family's page with it, or their GoFundMe, or any way that I can help. And I think it's just about being useful, and it definitely feels like it made some sort of impact. I did work with Campaign Zero, who are in America and represent families of victims or people falsely imprisoned, and I got to do a lot of really fulfilling projects with them and working directly with families. So
Yeah, because when I go on your page and I read a couple, I have to say that, like, I didn't realize either. You know, of course, everybody is aware of, like, Black Lives Matter, and I told you, you know, when I grew up in LA, and we were in Ireland, and back then we couldn't fly home because of the Rodney King beating, and that was a huge deal, kind of, at the time. But like, when I read the stories, like, a lot of them, you know, they happen to, some of them are happening to kids. They're getting shot in their own homes or whatever, and it usually is surrounded by race. It's usually a Black person. They're very emotional. Do you find it challenging, like, from an emotional perspective, like when maybe you get in a parent gets in contact, or a loved one gets in contact and says, like, please, could you share on your platform this story? Do you find that? Because I read some of them, and God, my heart breaks, because I just think, how has this happened to this, you know?
yeah, no, I do 100%. I try to outweigh that with, like, this is gonna do some good or raise awareness, because it like, if I was to sit back, like, it's obviously quite difficult doing this the whole time, that you could let it go in your head, especially someone with me who has problems with anxiety and things like that. But again, I just try to focus on being useful and, like, telling it from a journalist perspective, separate myself from it, and create something that is, like, the main thing for me is that they're easily digestible, and they tell the story simply, because there's so many different narratives everywhere, and, like, from both sides, people frame it in certain ways, where I try to tell it as flatly and, like, straightforward as possible, without injecting too much
And
of my own bias, maybe.
and you know what? That's actually a real skill. Because, like, you know, I've now posted a little bit on my LinkedIn and my Instagram or whatever. And, like, it's actually a skill to simplify something down to, like, a few short paragraphs, but get the point across.
Yeah.
So, like, is that just, did you study, like, English in college, or?
No,
You're
but
just like reading, you said.
yeah, I'm a huge reader, although I only really got big into reading after I left school and college, because I probably hated school and college so much that it put me off the idea of reading. But then when I left, I've absolutely fell in love with it. So that was probably my beginning of, like, and again, like, this wasn't something that this minute I did it, I had my formula, whatever. It developed, and it's still developing. And I learned as I went, and I think I'm even more effective at that work now than I was. And I revisit stuff the whole time and try to make it better, whether it be on anniversaries and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just something that I've taught myself.
But I noticed, like, okay, so no matter what, like, you can never win on social media,
No.
right? And I was reading, God, it actually makes me emotional. There was, like, one particular story. There was a little girl. She was 10 years old. She went into a library. She bought a book. It was on, like, sex education.
Yeah.
And she came home, and there was a chapter on abuse. And she said, "Mommy, this is me." And her dad was abusing her.
Yeah.
And the judge was like, you know, there's real. That book was kind
There's
of banned.
two heroes in this case: the little girl and the book.
Yeah. But on that post, there are comments like, you know, we shouldn't be sexualizing kids, and we shouldn't be doing this. And, like, you're always, even on the posts where, like, somebody gets pulled over, they get shot. I've seen this. They're like, people write, why do they always resist? Like, how
Yeah.
does that not drive? Like, because you
Yeah.
don't, it doesn't look like you respond.
The only ones, like, again, it was a learning curve, but like the only ones I respond to is if someone kind of goes or critiques the way it's presented or goes, actually, you have this wrong.
Okay.
And I'm very careful, and I spend a lot of time and I reread a lot before I post. But the rare time I might get a detail wrong, and the first thing I'll do is I'll remove it and fix it. But in terms of people's opinions, like, there's nothing to gain. I used to get into the DMs and be arguing with people, and you'd be talking like your own, like, I try not to do that because you don't get anywhere. And especially like if you look through those posts, there's the vocal minority of people who are against it, and like people are keyboard warriors. Like,
I know,
just
but
forget about
the
it.
reality is, and I think this challenge, like I had put up a post once, and it was like a post about gratitude in kids. But anyway, it went down a wrong path for someone, and like it got so many views and likes. But this one particular, so I just took it down because like I can't deal with this negativity. Because when you do look at the comments, it's always for the person that puts up the picture or the post or the reel, that it's the negativity that stands out. So like, do you just say, look, I don't read it, or it actually doesn't bother me too much?
I think for like the first the first hour or something when it's just beginning, I'll read the comments as they come in. But after a while, they just drown themselves out.
Yeah.
And like I just like and like again, like I do a lot of research and I read over it, and like once I'm like happy with it and like this is what I believe, some random person with 5 followers is voicing an opinion against it's not that makes nothing to me.
Yeah, exactly. And are there any topics, like I know, for example, you told me earlier that a lot of people, you gained like a massive amount of following, like 200,000 followers in a month, which was like Justin Timberlake and Pharrell and Amy Schumer kind of reposting your post. How did that feel?
Yeah, like at the time it was almost kind of conflicting because it was being shared by a lot of people and I was getting a lot of praise, but I didn't want the narrative to be centered on me.
Yeah.
And like I couldn't help, like I would feel guilt sometimes. I'd be like, a post would do really well or be shared by someone, and I'd have to remind myself that it's not about me getting praise or something. So that's one of the things about my book now. It's nice to be telling my own story and not feel conflicted about how it's received, or being able to be able to like actually really like embrace it being, if it, please God, does receive some praise. Do you know what I mean? Where again, I tried those other posts, I tried to kind of separate myself from them and let the story be the center of the narrative. And I was obviously delighted when people shared it because it was reaching a bigger audience and hopefully was making a bigger difference.
Do you ever have people say, like, because a lot of your stories are around race and gun violence and all of that, do you ever have people say, like, well, what do you know, you privileged Irish white boy sitting in your Dublin house?
Yeah, no, I'd have comments like that, and like I understand that as well, but again, that's the reason that I don't infuse my opinions into them. I'm like, you could read any article, and I'm just flatly using my art and my voice to basically give a different medium to these stories, which you could find anywhere in a newspaper. You're not going to a journalist in the New York Times and saying, why are you reporting on this? You're from your ivory tower in New York. Like, this is a media kind of way of like sharing stories. Is like, the world's changed and social media is almost more of a news platform than a lot of actual papers and stuff. So I'm just using it that way. And again, it's just giving a different voice to a story that you can find anywhere. It's not me injecting my bias or saying this is wrong, or I'm just telling the story.
Yeah, and there's some amazing, make sure you guys check out The Fake Pan, which you probably already are, because the stories are just phenomenal. But on a lighter note, you have some hilarious dating stories in there.
Yeah.
Like, the one I just read the other day was like, this guy, he goes on a date and he's like really into health and fitness. He's trying to get his fitness back and his health back. So he goes to a restaurant and he the woman orders a burger and he orders it salad, and he says it kind of loudly so everybody hears. She gets up and leaves, and she like doesn't come back for a while. And so he decides, oh God, this sucks. So he ends up eating her burger, and then she comes back and is like, sorry, I had an emergency with my cat. And he's like,
Yeah.
oh, but where do you get these? Great. Because like that infuses a bit of like joy
Levity,
and
yeah.
laughter.
Yeah, well, like again, that was a fun project because I just wanted to try something different, and I got people to send me in their dating stories, and I got so many of them, but it was just so fun to read them, the funny ones or even like the touching ones.
Yeah.
And it was just another way of telling a story, which is what I love doing, and kind of being able to bring them to life with my art. Because I love comics, I love the alternative kind of underground comics. There's a lot of stuff I work on which wouldn't be fitting for my platform, especially because my platform is kind of more based in activism and stuff. So if I was to post like a diary comic or like a joke comic, they don't normally. It's not that they're not received, but like they're too off brand. So
Yeah.
it was something like I felt like that those dating stories like fit kind of the same branding as the fake pan, and also were something different and more kind of in the realm of like I love comedy, and I love being able to like when people tell me these stories, being able to visualize them and bring them to life and imagine the scenes and everything was just a fun project.
Is there any particular story in all of the ones that you've done that's like, it might be heartbreaking or whatever, but it is really that you love the most, or that you're really connected with? Is there any particular one there that kind of really stands out to you?
There's a lot. Wouldn't say that there's one. I worked on a case with Campaign Zero of a guy called Keith Davis Jr. who was put in prison, and they did brilliant work, and I was just basically a vehicle for them to get their message out, doing my cartoons. But it became very heated with DA of Baltimore, and at one point she actually tried to put a gag order on us and me. Apparently I was mentioned specifically in a court document, and the way it actually ended up going is that she didn't win her election, was out, and Keith got released from prison, and being able to see the videos of him go to his family and surprise his son in school when he was supposed to serve many, many, many more years in prison, and knowing that I had some sort of just to be involved in it. I wouldn't be arrogant enough to say that whatever sort of impact it had, but it was just to be involved in it and be able, like, from my room in Dublin, I was able to have some sort of impact on this in a positive way.
Yeah.
So that was one I always look back on, and like I'm really proud to have been a part of.
Yeah. I think it's just kind of, it's all about connection with people, right?
Yeah.
And like doing something of value.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably started off doing your cartoons. You mightn't have realized how big. Like, was it just like for fun for you initially? Like,
well, when it started, again, I was bored of painting. It didn't feel like a creative outlet anymore. It didn't feel like I was saying anything. It was just decorative. It was people have probably listened to this who bought paintings off me and be like, "What, this hanging on my wall?"
yeah.
But no, it just didn't fulfill me. So I wanted to be able to say something, and as a big reader, I started doing the comics to be able to. I've always been involved in art, whether it be there's a stage of street art and stuff, and I think with comics I actually finally found my medium that I really am passionate about. If I had no Instagram followers, I'd be making comics. If I was working in an office, I'd be going home at night and making comics. I would have probably written this book with or without a book deal, or with or without the support I've gotten, because I'm so passionate about it.
And tell me how the book deal came along. Like, how does, I mean, like, hello, people, he's got a penguin, right?
Yeah.
Book deal. Like this is like every author's dream. Like, how did Penguin show up in your...
Yeah, so I got, early on, I got signed to an agency in New York. I was very lucky to get that. and we didn't really know what I was going to do. My comics to do with People Kill Police were still near MCM. I didn't feel like I was ready to pursue a larger project with that. Still uncomfortable kind of with my position of being a white guy in Dublin. So I was like, I'll keep them on social media for the moment because they serve their purpose there perfectly, just to be shared and raise awareness. So we didn't really know what I was going to do, and one day I put up a post just about dismissing myths or misconceptions around OCD,
Mm-hmm.
and it was my agent's idea. He emailed me, been like, "Listen, we saw this post. Would you ever think about telling your story of growing up with OCD? It could be really helpful to kids, especially the point you made in your post about it, the misconceptions being a huge part of it being diagnosed so late." And when I heard that, at first I was like, "There's no way I could do that." I was doing 10 panel posts on Instagram to then swap over into doing a 200 plus page book seemed really intimidating. But again, it was my dream. I was like, I'll give it a go. So the way, I don't know, people probably don't know the publishing process is you prepare a proposal and a sample. So I did probably a 20-page sample of just some stories from when I was younger, and then wrote out the proposal. And we refined that over months. My agents kind of gave me advice because it was all very new to me, and it's still new to me, of like different ways to present it. Eventually it was done, and they pitched it to publishers, and very quickly Penguin, or Laurie Hornick in Penguin, kind of made a preemptive offer, and it got the go-ahead from there. Laurie, my editor, is absolutely brilliant. She now has her own imprint in Penguin called Rocky Pond. She set it up, and it's kids' books, or books kids that kind of center on mental health and stuff, because she's had her own struggles with her daughter and mental health. And she, it's a really inspiring story. They did an article in People magazine about her going through this with her daughter. I think she was emboldened to, she wanted to, her position as a editor and in books, how can I help? And she then set up Rocky Pond, and people like me doing books for kids about mental health awareness. I think this is just her example of the same way I want to be useful. She's been useful. She's putting out books now for kids, and I think it's just amazing, and she's going to make a huge difference. And I'm so proud to have my book part of her roster and one of her first books she's putting out. So it's
amazing.
Yeah.
And now you're going to have to do, or there'll be some sort of launch. You'll probably be in the US, you were saying.
Yeah, well, again, this is all very new to me, so I'm a lot of the stuff you can do now virtually.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to maybe go to the US when it eventually comes out, but no concrete plans to travel just yet.
Yeah. Not yet.
Yeah.
But you'll be all over Good Morning America, I'm sure. You're
Yeah.
manifesting. I'm manifesting
Yeah,
for you.
yeah.
Kev. But is there, just final kind of couple questions, is there, I noticed that like on your platform, you do a lot of like gun violence and LGBTQ plus and all of that. Do you stay away from certain things like war, like all that, or is that intentional, or do you just have a particular focus for?
It's down to the limit of 10 panels. Most of my stories are focused on individuals,
Yeah.
or like events that take place over a matter of minutes, because it's easy to kind of tell it in a linear way. Or bigger topics, whether it be what's going on in Gaza or Ukraine, are a lot harder to condense into 10 panels. And a lot of the time, if I've tried and the product, it's almost, I think it'd be more harmful. Like you're trying to put these these things down into 10 panels can be problematic. Like, so I try to look for the individuals. So it's limiting. Like I'd love to do more on bigger topics, but with 10 panels, it's just hard.
Yeah. I think you did a really great one, and this just goes to show my ignorance on Sinead O'Connor.
Yeah.
And I knew she had ripped up the picture of the Pope, right?
Yeah.
But I had no real idea why. Just thought she was just like, fuck the Catholic Church. That's
Yeah.
what I thought. But in your panel, it like kind of explains that she was like denouncing pedophilia and child abuse in the church.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know that. And then I think, was she on Saturday Night Live, and then it was Joe Pesci that said he would,
he would have slapped her the following week he was hosting. And it was actually, it was her mother's picture of the Pope. Her mother was, I think, was quite abusive.
Yeah.
That she ripped up. And the backlash was insane. And then it was only a couple of years later that it was broken, that all the Vatican had done, hiding up priests and all the different abuses. So she spoke up when it wasn't the easiest thing to do, and she was completely lambasted for it.
Yeah.
Booed at the Bob Dylan anniversary concert and stuff, like. But it's a testament to her courage and her activism. Is she, even decades later, said she didn't care. I did in the quote in the comic that people go, "You ruined your career," and she was like, "I didn't ruin my career. I ruined the record producer who wanted to put in a swimming pool, or the guy who owned a car. Like, I fucked up their career, not mine."
Yeah, and you know what? Like, if you think about it, like you said, it takes so much courage to put yourself out there, knowing that, you know, you're going to be criticized, and she really was, and she just didn't back down.
Yeah.
Like, if anybody else was booed, would they not? They'd just get off the stage, but not her.
Yeah.
So it's quite, you know.
Bob Dylan, I'd recommend anyone to watch that. It's like, so in the SNL, she kind of did the a cappella Bob Marley War song, and then she was doing the Bob Dylan anniversary concert, and she walked up and met with loads of boos, and she walks back to the band and tells them all to basically stop, and she, with such conviction, sang the song again in a cappella, facing the crowd, and like, she was 25, I think, at the time.
Oh my God.
And you can just see, like, in her face, it gives me goosebumps every time. Like, it's just so inspiring. It's amazing.
She was inspirational. It's sad.
Yeah, really sad.
know?
Yeah.
It's a big loss.
Yeah.
So, final two questions. These are going to come out of left field, maybe for you. I told you I have my own little brand, Pause Penny, and it's all based on gratitude and manifestation. Manifestation in the sense of, like, what is your goal? So, who are you grateful for?
There's a lot of people. Do I have to pick one?
You could choose whoever you want.
I'm grateful for my parents, for sure, for believing in me and allowing me to pursue what I love. I think there's a lot of different situations where I could have had the same passion, but without the same support, not been able to pursue it and get lucky at the end of it. I was very late to get into comics. I could have been, without my parents believing in me and at times supporting me, I don't think I would have been given the room to reach my dream of getting the book, which I did. So I'm thankful to that for them. And then, of course, my fiancée Erica, who, even when my OCD gets bad, is supporting me and makes it a lot easier to navigate life.
Yeah, and just on your parents' piece, like, I don't know your mom, but I know your dad well.
Yeah.
Well enough. He sits on our board, and he's really, he would be considered really successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's amazing that, like you said, he gave you the room to be creative, as opposed to being like, well, like, you need to be a doctor, or a lawyer, or accountant, or...
I think that was striked off quite early.
Well, I had a chat with him, and he was really proud. So I think that it's kind of a lesson for parents. I've got 4 small kids to, like, recognize that, like, we need to let them, if they're creative, and they could have a really successful path down the creative path, as opposed to, like, fitting into the doctor, the lawyer, the businessman, whatever it is.
Because it's a risk. So it's just, like, it's definitely, like, it's a risk. So for parents, you kind of got to let them take that risk because it's worth it. Again, that's the famous quote, you can fail at something what's the word? You can fail at something I forget it now.
Yeah, well, fail.
You can fail at something you don't want to do. You can fail at jobs that you hate. So you might as well attempt something that you love.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there it is.
And so what are you manifesting? What's your goal? What's a big goal for you now?
I'm probably not much of a manifester. I'm probably the opposite, where I'm waiting for things to go wrong. So I'm just hoping things keep going well. It's kind of the way I kind of go with it. And anything that good that happens is a nice surprise.
Well, you know what? You can't manifest for somebody else because it's all your own responsibility. But I'm really hoping that your book puzzle goes, just you're getting to number one spots, and effectively you're just inspiring kids and parents and giving them a little bit of hope that you can still have a really good life if you're diagnosed with OCD. And
it sounds cliche, but they always say, like, if it reaches one kid or makes a difference to one person, it'd be worth it. And obviously I'd like it to do well and sell and stuff, but it'd be great to see how it gets across to kids and to see kind of the reaction. And I hope I get to hear from people when it comes out and kind of get more involved in the world of OCD, not as a medical professional or someone giving out medical advice, but as someone who's experienced it and kind of can relate and not sympathize, but can relate and kind of give comfort to people who are experiencing what I did.
Yeah, and it's all about, I think people having the courage to share their stories, it actually just gives other people hope.
Yeah.
And that's maybe something that you might have needed as a younger child, that if you just knew somebody that had it, that was able to navigate that path, that, you would be like, okay, well, look, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, and it'd be less shameful to be like, I'm not alone is kind of the main, one of the main takeaways I hope people get from the book, people who read it who have OCD, and for people who have a loved one with an OCD to kind of help them understand them more. Yeah,
and I think it would be also a great book in schools because maybe teachers will understand a little bit more, that understand a kid that maybe has this or kind of recognize it maybe in some ways.
Yeah.
If you can recognize it. I think it's going to, I really hope it does.
Do I.
It does brilliantly. I'm sure it will. And thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to be watching you on Good Morning America. I'm totally sure. You're going to be flying to the US.
We'll see. Again, it'd be a nice surprise.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.